Welcome to the show, everyone. This is another week of The Hash. We have an awesome week lined up for you. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and I'm delighted to be joined by our wonderful co-hosts. We have Ben Powers, Jen Sanasie, Will Foxley, Zack, Seward, bringing you all the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. And we're going to start off the day by talking about an interesting report from Citi. So, Zack, what do we have there?
Gotcha. So Citi, the giant banking operation, has published a report called Bitcoin at the Tipping Point. That's pretty good long deep dive, 108 pages or so, looking at Bitcoin and the digital asset ecosystem. I just wanted to read sort of the kicker to their introductory note and then kind of go from there. They close their introduction thusly: Bitcoin's future is still uncertain, but developments in the near term are likely to prove decisive as the currency balances at the tipping point of mainstream acceptance or a speculative implosion. So I think that's pretty strong way to cast off a 100-page document. Clearly they're looking at the institutional embrace of this so-called digital gold. But I did want to put that question to you. We are at this tipping point, this interesting moment in which Bitcoin is being embraced by Wall Street. Naomi, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? Mainstream acceptance, speculative implosion, or simply other at this point? What's your take?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very clear we're at a tipping point. We have seen such an influx of institutional players over the past year, and it's just heating up constantly. Everyone's talking about it, and they're talking about it in increasingly favorable terms as well. So I'm waiting for the pushback, because there's always a pushback. We know that crypto is a threat to many institutions, many government entities, and so I'm just waiting what the next narrative is that's going to push back. But one thing I did like in the report that you referenced, so they have a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer that's really cool. It says, "All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident." So, I mean, I think that we've got different levels of society at different stages simultaneously. I think some people are still in the ridiculing it stage. Some people are still in the violently opposing it stage. And you've got a bunch of people, increasingly so, who are taking it as self-evident. And I think that's just going to increase with time. Ben, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, wasn't Citi initially part of the rejecting this outright sort of phase and that part of this discussion? So, maybe they're moving along. It was a funny quote to kind of put in as a kicker to this. I think that, if they're putting together this kind of in-depth report on Bitcoin and kind of the tipping point in which way it might be going, I think that's a strong sign for Bitcoin. It shows just how closely people are paying attention to, we're beyond a 3-paragraph press release saying we might do something or not, and we're really getting into the in-depth and nitty-gritty details here. So it's a good educational document. I just want to, hat tip to CoinDesk here. We had a bunch of articles cited in the footnotes of these, so come to us for your educational content on a lot of these areas. But I think it'll be interesting going forward. But it was a really nice way to kind of start out the week, particularly I think in relation to, some people crying FUD and talking about a crash last week and all this other stuff, and we're still way up from where we were even just a year ago.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if this document kind of front runs more active involvement in the space from Citi. I know we've seen, reporting by CoinDesk and others about Goldman Sachs potentially eyeing a development in the space. BNY Mellon obviously announced a custodial play that they're going to be rolling out to their very large customers. So I'm curious to see if this sort of comes in advance of some more active steps, whether it's through partnership with crypto native tech firms or others, for Citi to start getting in on this action. Will, I'm going to kick it to you. I know there's some really interesting technologies mentioned throughout the piece. Ethereum obviously gets mentioned. The Link Marines are happy to see that Chainlink gets a pretty comprehensive mention. The fact that they're diving in, the analysts at Citi are diving in at this granular level, sort of to me is interesting at least. I don't know. I'm curious what your takeaways are.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting corollaries between banking culture and finance culture and crypto culture. Crypto culture, of course, is just very number go up, groupthink. I think it's the same manner in a lot of banking and finance. I have a friend who works at Goldman Sachs, and he is now on one of the desks for emerging assets. And beforehand, he was working there. He was on this desk. He was very anti-crypto. And then these notes started coming out from institutional partners saying, well, maybe we should look at Bitcoin. Maybe we should do this. And now he's really interested, not because the number went up, but because his work, Goldman and other big bankers are publishing these research notes. And so I think that's kind of like the turning point is you see a few people get interested inside, and maybe a few years ago it was a bad career move to publish something on Bitcoin. But now there's more people in the market who are willing to talk about it. There's some bigger names like Paul Tudor Jones came out earlier this summer, or Ray Dalio. And that kind of gives people the ability to talk about these really more interesting, nuanced technology questions than they were able to beforehand. And I think we'll just kind of see more of this happen over time, especially with you mentioning like Link or Ethereum, which are more bleeding edge research projects at the moment. I don't see any banks getting involved, but the fact that they're talking about them kind of points to a cultural change inside these big banks, and they're willing to look at some of these riskier assets.
It is interesting, the signaling. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Nope, you got it.
It's interesting what signaling devices people need before they take the lead. Like you mentioned that, well, these people had all these institutional investors start to talk about this, and that made them reconsider things. I remember when I was first getting into this, there were a bunch of Austrian economists at the time who were like, this is kind of dumb. And it wasn't until like people like Jeffrey Tucker, a big person who formerly worked for the Mises Institute, but big Austrian economist started talking about it, and people were like, oh, I'm going to take this seriously because a serious thinker like Jeffrey is involved. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum, people like Grimes doing an NFT. You have basketball NFTs. You have artists. You have Elon Musk as this thought leader. Some people just need a star to get involved. And then they're like, oh, it's cool, So it's very interesting what different areas of society need to pull that trigger to actually look into this and take it seriously.
Yeah, I like Naomi. I like you're situating this conversation in sort of the meta discussion around how these conversations unfold. Talking about the Gardner hype cycle, or the first they ridicule you, then they embrace it, then it's inevitable. It's funny to zoom out to those terms. We're actually, I've just been told that we're going to have one of the authors of this report is actually going to be on All About Bitcoin at 3 p.m. Eastern today on CoinDesk TV. So I know I'll be tuned into that to see if they drop any hints about any developments that they may be working on in this space. So with that, let's change gears a little bit. I'm going to toss it back to you, Naomi, for our second story of the day. What do you got?
For sure. So some really interesting news. There's a group that's kind of like a WikiLeaks style group. They call Distributed Denial of Secrets, or DDO Secrets, play on the word there. And they have a collection of 70 gigabytes of data from Gab, which is a social media platform. It's largely recognized as being a very right-wing platform. It represents more than 40 million posts. Now, they say that they are releasing this information to journalists, data scientists, social scientists, researchers. They're selectively choosing the people who get the data and obviously not releasing it publicly because it's sensitive. And the idea is that they want people to analyze this, to look further into what happened on January 6th with the riots at the Capitol and all of this. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into this topic. Like, first of all, I will mention, because a lot of people, they're very anti a lot of these platforms like Gab. I'm a big free speech advocate, especially for people I don't agree with. That's the whole point of free speech. And I will point out that, this group isn't it's not all noble causes for them. Last week, they actually controversially began publishing collections of corporate data, which was stolen and leaked by ransomware hackers after their victims refused to pay. So this is a group that is literally, exploiting people and just trying to steal money as well. But the big issue, I think, here is the idea of these social media platforms collecting our data and not protecting it. Because we've seen in the past, Facebook actually tried to implement end-to-end encryption in their chats so that there wasn't this treasure trove of information that people could steal. Government pushed back and said, no, we don't want this to be encrypted. You had that Twitter hack that happened last year where it probably the best possible outcome of a Twitter hack, right? It was this really juvenile attempt being like, hey, send Bitcoin to this account. And it was just copied and pasted across all these big platforms. And they walked away with, some money. But imagine if they'd gotten access to the president's account and was like, hey, we're launching a drone strike on Russia. Or, so much stuff could have happened if they go and log into Elon's account and said, oh, Tesla's price is plummeting. I'm selling everything. There could have been extreme havoc that's unleashed with that. I want to talk to you about the idea, and I'm going to throw you, Ben, about the idea of these companies and their responsibility to look after our data. And if they can't protect it, perhaps we should be looking at more decentralized methods of storing this data. What are your thoughts on all of this and these places being a treasure trove for information?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I wonder so they have certain obligations legally with which to protect our data, but, what's the incentive for them to be really, really good at doing so? We saw Facebook get off with a relatively paltry fine for, privacy invasions and data abuse previously. And so, what is the impetus for companies to do this? Is everybody going to get off of Gab now? I think that's actually probably not going to happen. And so if you don't have customers that are leaving, why might you protect it? That being said, this shows just a number of different ways that data can be insecure. I believe this attack was done through an SQL injection, which is basically inputting code into a couple different fields and returning information that shouldn't have been visible from the back end. And so they have private conversations, it seems. It seems they have private posts and a variety of other things. And so, I think in the one hand, I think the group is being maybe somewhat responsible and not making this public, right? They're trying to let groups do research on it. On the other hand, I think the fact that, this is a valuable resource for social media research and behavioral research in some ways kind of points to the fact about how important this information is. Gab is obviously not private by design in such a way as you see a lot of decentralized architecture set up. And that just means that, because this information is centralized, it can be accessed from a single entry point, whereas a decentralized system, that's not the case. Your information is localized, and it's a much, much taller task to try and access any large amount of individuals. So, this highlights the risks, right? This highlights the fact of, security might not be front and center for some platforms because there's just not a market mechanism to do so. And decentralized alternatives are out there.
Mm-hmm. Jen, I want to ask you, what do you think the mainstream population thinks about this? Do you think they're concerned about their private messages getting leaked? Do you think people even consider that when they're evaluating which platforms to use?
I think they are concerned. I think when they're evaluating what platforms to use, maybe it's not in the top 3 concerns. I think for creators and people who are publishing and sharing things on social media, they're more concerned about where their audience is. A lot of people are making money off of their content. They want to get those views, those numbers. They want to be able to see the return for their investment on their creative pieces. So I think are my private messages going to be shared doesn't come up in top 3 concerns. I think us having conversations like this and stories like this being published are going to make those concerns more prevalent for creators. So I think it is becoming a concern, and drawing attention to these decentralized platforms are super important. And I think it's one thing to get the creators there, but how do we get their audiences there? We have to move these large groups of people to these platforms. And I don't know how we're going to do that. I think these conversations will help, but I just don't know how we're going to move masses over there.
Mm-hmm. Zack, when all of the WhatsApp mass migration happened, they say that it was the largest digital migration in history. They changed the terms of service that would make it less private, and everyone flocked to Telegram and Signal. I don't know why Telegram. Telegram is terrible privacy, but they also flocked to Signal. Were you one of the people that thought, okay, there's something here about privacy, I'm going to have more of my conversations on Signal? Or were you I'm just going to stick, keep them where they are?
I'm probably in the lazy keep them where you are camp.
Me
I do a
too.
lot of source development in Telegram. I'm trying to get a little bit better at Signal, but WhatsApp, I'm not super keen on that one. So that's just me personal Zack take. But Ben, I wanted to ask you, is this the same thing that happened to Parler? Didn't they get hacked too? And then all the data from Parler was made public? Is this the same type of thing that we're seeing?
No, this is different. So that was data web scraping, which was executed on that. And this was actually social, and that's something that social researchers have engaged in with some sites. So that's what happened with Parler, where they're just grabbing all this publicly available information, whereas this was more of a actual attack and hack that was executed against it. And reason why this information wasn't previously available to researchers in this way. So 2 different things in that instance.
Okay,
one thing I will just say to people sorry, Zack.
No, you go for it. You got it.
I was going to say, as we wrap up the topic, I will just say to people, like, it is worthwhile considering every time you send an email to someone, is this information that I want public? Every time you send a Facebook Messenger message to someone, is this information I want public? Because something is going to happen. At the end of the day, these places are going to be hacked. There is going to be a giant leak of information. It's inevitable because this information is available. There is a treasure trove of information there. Hackers do see a bullseye, painted target on there. So just be aware of that. And I know it's difficult to make these changes, but maybe just start to make more mindful choices is what I'd encourage people to do, because it is going to help you in the long run when these things come to a fore. But Zack, what have we got coming up soon?
Well, we have strong service journalism here at The Hash talking to you about data privacy, and we're going to do more talking about that after the break. We're going to talk about Facebook versus Apple on the privacy front. You just got to stick with us through this break, and then you'll see our faces again, and it'll be all great. Okay, see you soon.
Welcome back to The Hash. So we are moving over to Binance Smart Chain and Ethereum before we go over to Apple and more privacy talk. We got to break things up a little bit, right? It's my opinion. But anyways, this past weekend saw kind of a huge flare up, in my opinion, on Twitter between two rival projects, Binance Smart Chain and Ethereum. Binance Smart Chain is more or less a copy and paste of Ethereum, with a few different features. Notably, it only has about 21 nodes that process information on the network compared to Ethereum's 8,000, I think, at press time. And Binance Smart Chain is a chain, just like a blockchain, like any other chain out there, but it's for decentralized finance specifically. Binance launched this project quite a while ago, but it's morphed over the years. And now they're trying to scoop up Ethereum projects, DeFi projects like Uniswap or whatever, and they copy paste them and throw them on Binance Smart Chain. And then users move over to Binance Smart Chain because it's cheaper to transact on. This has infuriated a lot of Ethereum community members, and they took action this last weekend with one developer, unknown right now, who released a contract on Binance Smart Chain called Tank Wars, making fun or making light of or pointing towards the Tiananmen Square incident in 1989. The point being that Binance Smart Chain exists it claims to be a decentralized network, but is perhaps not. And that Binance has lots of parties and affiliates in China, and they have a lot to lose from keeping this contract live with the Chinese Communist Party not wanting that information to be on a public ledger. So if this contract was on Bitcoin or Ethereum, there's not much that the Communist Party could do about it. But because it's on Binance Smart Chain, CZ and Binance are probably pressured to take this down by the Communist Party of China. So I want to throw this over to Naomi as someone who's been cataloging a lot of human rights abuse in the space and in cryptocurrencies particularly. What is your take on this incident? And if you need any more explanation about it, it was kind of a niche topic and hot spot over the weekend.
So I think that, Eric Voorhees had a tweet a while ago that stuck out for me where he said, Ethereum maxis don't be to the Binance chain what Bitcoin maxis are to Ethereum, as this idea of people being so tribal that they just hate any sort of competition. Now, I understand what the Ethereum maxis are trying to point out here. They're trying to prove that Binance chain is not as decentralized as Binance claims. They want it to get rolled back to before these smart contracts existed. They're trying to pressure the point by using things that are big, like fulcrums or linchpins for Binance, which is they don't want to displease the Chinese government. You make a good point about if this were on Ethereum or this were on Bitcoin, then they couldn't take it down. Are people actually, using their power for good? Are they actually using this change to get information to places like China, where they have, the famous great Chinese firewall there that blocks out information? Are they trying to get information to people in North Korea, or are they just kind of shit stirring, mind the language, and just trying to like push back on something because they don't like competition? I mean, Ethereum at the moment for DeFi doesn't work in so many ways. I wish it did because it's awesome. I love it. I love the DeFi world. I love what Ethereum's created. Fees are so high that unless you're a huge player, it's just not financially viable for people to participate in this. It's not possible for me to go on Augur and place a bet and try and make money from that unless it's a huge bet, because the fees are just so astronomical there. So if people are using Binance and they're still able to participate in this world that is a lot more decentralized than traditional finance, I think that's really cool, and Ethereum will eventually get there. Ethereum hopefully will scale soon, and when people may migrate back to the more decentralized platform. But then in the interim, let people have choices and stop trying to force a closure. That's my take on that. I don't know. Zach, what's your thought on all of this?
I was so logged off this weekend. This is all new to me. But wait, so did Binance like have to roll it back? Like, what's the end of this story?
No,
like,
they haven't.
The here? They haven't. Nothing has happened. Okay, I got it.
No,
so it's
and
like
people are also. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, it's just like a provocation, right? It's like gets people thinking about some of these issues in like tangible terms, right? Is that the idea? This is like shit posting with code. Is that like that we're talking about here?
Yeah, these things, the mob rule tends to escalate. And instead of just like pointing out a flaw and saying, hey, this is for information, people tend to pile on, and then it becomes a lot bigger than they intended. It's like, yeah, let's actually bring them down. Let's actually crush all the Binance employees because they're, part and parcel to this non-decentralized thing. Like that sort of mentality is what bothers me a lot about the crypto space and the pile on. Ben, what were your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I guess I wasn't following this either. Will gave me the too long didn't read like earlier this morning, catching up on it. I think it's interesting. I'm trying to think of the right word exactly, where you're trying to invoke the powers of a more authoritarian government to come down and test the infrastructure of a supposedly decentralized network in this sense, which I understand BSC is publicly, that's what they say is the case. So I'm wary of that as like a common practice. That doesn't seem to be the bear you want to poke for people who are living on the ground in China potentially. Well, I think you had a couple thoughts on this, but to me, it seems like, maybe Naomi, you were getting to this, like point it out and then you can observe it and you can talk about it, but trying to invoke the specter of like a government arm coming down is not necessarily the best route forward, in my opinion, on this.
Will, what's the more mainstream takeaway from this story? I think we're talking about a lot of different things, but for people watching the show, like what is the one thing that they can take away that actually applies to what they're maybe kind of starting to dabbling in the crypto universe?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. So to me, I think it kind of points back to an op-ed actually we had on CoinDesk about 2 years ago now from Gavin Wood, who was a co-founder of Ethereum and now is building Polkadot. And he entitled that op-ed, Here Come the Blockchain Wars. And I think that is kind of what we're seeing right now, is that there's a lot of competitors for Ethereum, and some of them are really shoddy projects and some of them are decent projects. But either way, Ethereum has a $150 billion market cap. That's a lot of money on the table for developers, and people are going to come for that money. And people who are involved in the space are going to get some mud on their sleeves from protecting their turf. I think this was an instance of bad judgment by whoever did it, because there is the possibility that Binance employees are detained or put in jail or whatnot just because someone threw up this contract. On the other hand, it's also a bad look for Binance in the sense that this blockchain really isn't decentralized right now. And it's pretty well known that it's not. And Binance is taking on that regulatory risk by throwing that chain up and trying to compete with Ethereum. So, I think a balanced view in this, and the takeaway is that blockchains should be permissionless ledgers where no one can be attacked by government for using them. And if you are, then you're not doing it correctly. So you got to be careful. But I'm going to toss over to Naomi.
Will, it's just a quick question for you as we wrap up. Is this going to make Binance even less decentralized? Because are people going to be unwilling, if they're in China where so much mining happens, are they going to be unwilling to run like Binance chain nodes if they're putting information through their server that is basically trying to be censored by the Chinese government? Is that going to make people step back and say, I actually don't want anything to do with this because I don't want to get into any trouble? What are your thoughts?
I think there's a huge question in regards to crypto in China going forward. I'm beginning the process of talking with some mining networks over there to see what their takeaway is from this. I think if you saw the New Yorker published 2 days ago a really shocking story drama on the Uyghur population being detained in Xinjiang in China, just for some people being detained just for having WhatsApp on their phone. And so I think there's a huge incoming tsunami of danger for a lot of people in crypto in China. And that would be my takeaway. I don't know what it means for Binance. I don't know what it means for Binance employees, but this is a situation I'm pretty worried about, just covering it. But we're going to move over to Apple and Facebook, which is also a never-ending drama story with Jen.
All right. So back to the social media giants and privacy. Facebook launches an ad campaign that shows how worried the social media giant is about Apple's upcoming privacy changes. Let's take a look.
Or we won't.
It seems like it's coming back. Oh, here we go.
I like the shoes. That's a cool bite.
All right. So what does the ad say, Jen?
So basically, the ad is telling us that small businesses are going to be affected by Apple's upcoming changes to their privacy terms. So as we know, Apple is going to require apps in the App Store to ask people who are downloading the apps for permission to turn on things like tracking. Facebook is trying to tell small businesses that this is going to affect you because you are not going to be able to have targeted ads and target the people who are looking for your products. There are a few things wrong with this messaging because Apple is really just asking for people to give their permission. So Ben, I'm going to throw it over to you. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about what's going on between Apple and Facebook right now.
Well, I mean, when the whole Australia saga was going down with Facebook removing all news from the platform there, I was just thinking, I was like, okay, what is Facebook actually good for then? I don't go on there very often, if at all. There's not a whole lot of robust conversations happening. So, I mean, here's your answer: is they really want to focus on personalized ads for small businesses. But yeah, I think it shows, kind of the fact that they've launched this ad campaign. And I think the article, Jen, that you brought to the table was titled, Facebook's lost the war on privacy in this instance, because they're just not even pushing back on that anymore. They're just saying like, hey, personalized ads are great for small businesses. But it does really show that, if you give people a choice, which is really important, that they probably won't choose to opt into tracking and a whole variety of other features that allow them to be targeted and their information sort of diced and isolated in such a way as to serve them an ad. Maybe they just don't want to be advertised to it this way. But if that's the case, that undercuts Facebook's entire business model, and that's why they're really pushing back against this. But that was my big takeaway here was, if you ask people, they'll probably say no. And I think it's a really important point that needs to be, just drilled in further.
Will you?
I'll jump in there really quick. Yeah, so I saw a really interesting graphic the other day, and take this with a grain of salt. It's from a tech reporter I follow that I like. But he said Facebook has about 575 PR people on staff. And that is, I think, like 5 times the number of people who are covering Facebook as reporters in like all of the US. So like the PR war itself is just always kind of interesting. We're seeing these big social communities and big corporations behind them trying to protect themselves from each other. It's not even against reporters anymore. It's corporations versus corporations with PR campaigns against each other. So it's an interesting time to be a tech reporter in this space, because I wonder if the questions you're asking even matter as much, because it's just getting drowned out by money and big TV advertisement campaigns. So I want to throw that over to Naomi, just as someone who's an independent journalist and has a great YouTube presence. How do you cover tech stories like this?
I cover them by trying to let people realize that privacy is, I hate to say it, and Ben's going to be like, privacy is not something that the average person cares about. And we've proven that on this show. You know, we're all tech savvy people here, and yet there's still this barrier. There's this friction when it's like, you have the choice of convenience or you have the choice of privacy, which you're going to choose. Now, the biggest outcome of the Snowden revelations wasn't that everyone went, oh my God, I suddenly care about privacy. Let me lock down my messages. It wasn't it at all. It was that smart people at the head of these companies started advocating on our behalf. People, you know, like even Google, you know, if you look at the internet traffic before the Snowden revelations 2013, most of it was overwhelmingly unencrypted. And after the Snowden revelations, it's overwhelmingly encrypted. So Google jumped on board and started encrypting traffic. You had Apple, which automatically encrypted iPhones. And there was this big push from these companies to say, actually, we didn't realize the NSA was getting all this data. We're going to lock things down for you. And I think that's, what we're seeing here is a continuation of this story. Individuals, when it comes down to it, they're going to be like, yeah, I kind of like Instagram giving me tailored ads. They always know what I want, right? And they actually haven't fully processed the trade-off they're making, because privacy is this abstract concept, and the advertisements they're getting in their face is a very real thing. Now, what Apple is doing is bringing this conversation back and saying, we're going to help you out. We're going to put that choice right in front of you. Do you want them to track you or not? It's a binary. And making people choose, I think, is a really great step forward for privacy. So hats off to Apple. But we're actually going to wrap up the show by going straight into the YouTube drama from last week. Now, CoinDesk's channel got taken offline, which you may or may not have been aware of. Now, Ben, walk us through what happened there.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's come back to the decentralized versus centralized models in a way that hits close to home. So CDTV, our YouTube channel, was taken down last Friday, I believe, and then went off during the midst of one of our shows all about Bitcoin at 3 p.m. And it was shut down for about 28 hours. Now, just basically an automated email, we were told that content that encourages illegal activities or incites users to violate YouTube's guidelines is not allowed on YouTube. There is no indication about what that might have been or why we might have been reported or who might have done it or anything like that. So about 28 hours later, we were reinstated, and a YouTube spokesperson told CoinDesk that when it's brought to our attention that content has been removed mistakenly, we act quickly to reinstate it. We also allow uploaders to easily appeal removals. So, this just shows some of the power these centralized platforms have. But, Naomi, I know you'll probably have thoughts on this, and you're on YouTube yourself. So give us some feedback for the audience here.
It's terrifying. It's so terrifying because this happens all the time. And CoinDesk is a really large platform. Everyone goes to CoinDesk for their crypto news because it's, it's just in-depth reporting. You know that you're going to get a story covered on the topic you want to cover. What about the obscure person who no one's heard of, who gets their channel deleted, and it's the same reason? There were actually no violations. Oops, there's a mistake here. I know a lot of people who've had their channels violated, deleted, and they're just not sure why. So I think it's a big issue. I really, really want CoinDesk to sync their channel to LBRY. This is going to be my push. I'm going to push all of you guys. Join me in this crusade, because the whole reason why platforms like LBRY exist is exactly for this reason. You don't have to do any work. You just sync your channel. All your videos are there. But what it means is that audiences will always be able to access your content, no matter whether or not a centralized entity decides to take your channel down or not. And if you build a community on one of these other platforms, I have the same number of subscribers on LBRY as I do on YouTube. So if my YouTube channel gets shut down, that's 41,000 people that I say goodbye to. But I have 41,000 people on LBRY that I'll be like, hey guys, that sucks, but let's pick up where we left off. Let's dust ourselves off. So I think it's just a great resource for people, and decentralization, I think, is the future. Zack, what were your thoughts when you realized that the show had been taken down? Were you like, what was your thought?
I was like, wow, they listened to the Naomi segment. They listened to Naomi's repeated calls to escape the evil grasp of the tech giants, and they said, no more.
It's true.
Pull the plug. So I'm glad that it was resolved in relatively short order. But yeah, it really does speak to, the ability to, as much as you can in the online world, own your own platforms, own your own audience. YouTube and other tech giants are in the business of taking your content and making money off of it. And, at the end of the day, it's their audience and not necessarily yours. So, whether it's library or whatever the solution, it speaks to the importance of cultivating your own platforms to the extent that you can. That's why we're streamed on CoinDesk.com and other outlets as well. So I'm glad that the YouTube situation has seemingly resolved itself. But yeah, Ben, back to you.
No, and I do think it highlights a really huge issue around content moderation and the way that's executed. I've done a lot of reporting on that generally, and also the people that do it. But a lot of these systems, just because of the scale of stuff that's put into them, use automated tools to detect or take in reports and then just shut things down automatically. So I think it begs the question, not only do we need alternative decentralized systems, but at the same time, do we need platforms that are at the scale that no humans can cope with the amount of content coming into them? And I think there is something to be examined there about just how much stuff is posted on these platforms to an extent that you have to use machine learning and other tools to try and take things down, and then you get it so terribly, terribly wrong.
So Ben, what's the solution then? I mean, 20,000 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every day, right? There's no way a human is going to be able to go through all of those videos. And so I do not agree with what happened to our YouTube channel. I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. What's the solution then? Is it just a bunch of smaller platforms where we can have humans that are going through content one by one? That doesn't seem realistic to me.
I mean, I think it's a trade-off, right? There's an idea of, does YouTube need to be as big of a platform as it is? Whether you want to be in a centralized system or you want a decentralized system where content moderation doesn't really exist in the sense that we typically know it. But these are all questions that we look forward to discussing more on the Hash coming forward. So Zach, I want to toss it to you to close us out.
Hey, nice toss, nice shirt, and I'll see you all tomorrow. That's it for the Hash on Monday. We'll be back again tomorrow. Stick with us on CoinDesk TV, where we have all about Bitcoin at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. For Zack, Seward, Naomi, Brockwell, Jen Power. Wait, so Ben Powers, Jen Sanasie, and
that
Will
was
Foxley.
Jen and Ben.
I'm going to show myself out. I don't know what's going on.
All right, see y'all tomorrow.
All right, see you guys.